There's two principles that constitute enlightenment, and we need to engage both of them if we're going to see the return of both the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. The sacred feminine principle is the principle of non-aggression, the non-aggression principle. The first pillar of enlightenment is this sacred feminine principle. It is also called the non-aggression principle. It states, very simply, do not engage in violence. Violence is the immoral initiation of undue physical force which one does not have the right to take against their fellow being. In other words, do not immorally initiate non-rightful use of physical power to coerce, constrain, or compel the rightful physical behavior or free will choice of other sentient beings. Don't engage in violence. Along with that, wedded to that, in union, in sacred union with that, is the sacred masculine principle of self-defense, which I talked a lot about at last for your mind 2. The second pillar of enlightenment is the sacred masculine principle, also called the self-defense principle. This principle states sentient beings have the inherent right to use force to defend themselves from violence conducted upon them by another. Never to initiate that force, but to use it in response to violence that has been waged against them in proportion to that violence. That's the sacred masculine principle of self-defense. The sacred feminine, or the lost principle, as I refer to it, is the dynamic of care. What we care about on a day-to-day basis acts as the driving force of our thoughts and, most importantly, the driving force of our actions. Therefore, care can be seen as the ultimate generator of the quality of our experience. This principle has been often referred to as the generative principle, the creative principle. The word generative is derived from the Latin verb generare, which means to create. What we care enough to put our will behind, what we use the sacred feminine care enough to put our will behind, the sacred masculine action of will, dynamic of will, is what ultimately gets created in our world. This is the real law of attraction, the real law of manifestation. The world is the way that it is today, sadly, because most people do not care enough, even if they say they want things to be different, to change the world through their actions. This is why the dark occult, the cult of ultimate evil, the order givers of the cult of ultimate evil engage in a ceremony yearly, a symbolic ceremony called the cremation of care, immolating care symbolically. And their order followers continue to do it right here in the real world, not the symbolic world, the very real world of behaviors. True enlightenment is the sacred union of both of these principles, the sacred feminine principle of non-aggression combined with and wed to the sacred masculine principle of self-defense. Only when we create that sacred union between the sacred masculine and sacred feminine within each of us are we going to see real world change happen. This is the alchemical wedding, as it has been referred to as. And it's beautifully, symbolically depicted here on the tarot card, the Lovers. Then that sacred feminine energy can drive the sacred masculine energy, because care ultimately has to drive the will. This is what was meant by the phrase, love is the law, love under will. Love has to be the foundation. Higher consciousness has to be the foundation upon which you build the sacred masculine will. So the sacred feminine has to be the foundation. That's true care. Then you could build the true will, the sacred masculine dynamic upon that foundation, that sacred feminine dynamic of love. The sacred feminine drives the sacred masculine action. And how ultimately the cult followers, the order followers of the cult of ultimate evil are going to have to break their mental bondage is through the use of the lost word. We need the return of the sacred feminine energy, which is the dynamic of true care, nurturing, and compassion. Last year, 2 years ago at the Free Your Mind conference back in 2013, I gave a lecture called New Age Bullshit and the Suppression of the Sacred Masculine, which is about how the New Age religions ultimately want to create a dynamic of not taking action, of suppressing the masculine, the sacred masculine dynamics of the personality. What this lecture is all about are the forces that are trying to suppress the sacred feminine aspect of the consciousness and personality. A very powerful concept in my work, which comes from the esoteric tradition of Freemasonry, as I will describe here. The lost word is a concept in esoteric Freemasonry, which represents a state of consciousness that has been largely lost to the majority of human beings. In order to speak the so-called lost word, a human being must work upon themselves in order to achieve a state of non-contradiction between their thoughts, emotions, and actions. In such a state of unity consciousness, that being has truly come to understand the self and the working operations of natural law, moral law. And in doing so, they've deeply realized the objective difference between right and wrong action. Or, as these concepts are referred to in Freemasonry, light and darkness, respectively. Light is truth and right action, and darkness in Freemasonry is ignorance and wrong action. In the enlightened state of consciousness that is generated through the knowledge of natural law, conscience, in other words, a human being is finally able to step up and speak the lost word, which is no. No is the lost word. No is the word of all power. We reclaim all of our power as sovereign beings when we say no to evil, when we say no to authority, when we say no to someone who is trying to tell us what to do against our better judgment and against what we know to be right. Okay? Those who don't know will never say no to evil. See, the lost word is not only no, N-O, but it is also know, K-N-O-W. Knowledge is the transformer that we need to use to change the modality of consciousness that the order followers are in. When we know the difference between right and wrong through conscience, then we will step up and say no to evil. Only when we say no to those who would claim to be our owners, to those who would claim that it is they who will decide which rights we have or do not have, do we stop externalizing our power to anyone outside of ourselves, and in doing so, reclaim all of our natural rights. Sadly, very, very few people in our world have the knowledge, the care, and most importantly, the courage that is required to do this. That is why the all-powerful lost word is considered lost to humanity. But we can reclaim it. We can reclaim it through the knowledge of our rights, through the knowledge of right versus wrong behavior,